allow me to say how much I'm delighted, and it's really to thank Mustafa Njai, who is somehow my Njatige in Banjul, because he was the first one to welcome me when I arrived a few months ago. And not only in terms of welcoming us, but when we talk about Mustafa, I think each of us has a special relationship, which means that it's my brother, you know, or my dad. And I think it comes from the humility that he's demonstrated throughout what we have seen in these videos for more than 30 years, but he's always incarnating on a daily basis. And thank you really for that and for all the contribution. I'm standing here to also praise the fact that this event is very special because he's celebrating 3 decades, and then we are entering a new decade, which is the decade for action, for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And somehow, sometimes in French we say, "Y a pas de hasard," so that everything that Mustafa and throughout his contribution has done for this country, and I would say for Africa, as a development influencer, can be known, especially by the youth, so that they really have reference to look up. We were discussing about all the capacities that we are discovering on a daily basis within the Gambia, outside the Gambia, and people may sometimes don't know, not only in the Gambia, but throughout Africa, that need to be known as at the largest scale. Because for the achievement of these development goals, which are mainly people-centered, it's important to have models like the one in the room, and I cannot say names because we all have them in mind, but it's a pride to have it, especially when we enter an important decade, which is also a decade of many challenges, emerging challenges that nobody was foreseeing 20 or 30 years ago. And the fact that we have this special panel this morning makes me also very proud, because we are entering a decade where we are celebrating the 75 years of the UN, but we are also celebrating the 25 years of the Beijing conference, where we really set the agenda. I was a young participant in Beijing 25 years ago, and it's really a set of momentum for the action to reinforce gender empowerment and set the stage on the next step to make sure that what we are talking about gender is a reality in our household, in our daily life. We are living transformation, especially with the youth. We went to so many regions with Mustafa, and thank you for taking that time to always to be, like you said, the youth power, but also to make sure that this sense of entitlement that you were mentioning when we went in the regions, whether it's in Soma, throughout the country, this sense of entitlement that sometimes we are seeing is not really taken as granted, but people need to know what are the passes to make sure that they can achieve and contribute for the lives that are valued. And finally, I would would like to also reiterate our commitment as UN, especially as UNDP, because we have the integrator role of making all the SDGs a reality, not only for the Gambia, but throughout the globe. And we are present in over 174 countries, and it's really a historic moment for the Gambia to make the difference and set foundations that can help to build a strong nation. And I think what we are being witnesses the past 3 years, and what we have heard yesterday and what we will hear also today, shows a commitment for the Gambian to open a new chapter and to make this decade for action a reality for all. I really thank you from my heart, Mustafa, my brother, my friend, and my Njatige, I would say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Aissata. Thank you. I have to do this before we officially commence with the second session of the TAF Africa Global Conference. Please, if you are excited to be here and ready to grasp as much knowledge as possible, I need you to put your hands together for yourselves. So we'll now start with the first session for today, which is Empowering Gambian Women for Sustainable and Equitable Development. We all crave for a world where women and girls are given equal opportunities to representation, equal opportunities to explore beyond their potentials. No stereotyping, no sexism, no gender-based violence. Just a world where women and men are allowed to shine equally. So ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator for this session, who is no other person but our very own mentor, a woman with a distinctive personality that we all look up to. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together as I hand over the baton to Madam FATOU BENSOUDA. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words, and good morning to all of you. Once again, I'm quite impressed with the turnout this morning, especially for this topic. It's really a very, very important one that concerns us all, not just women, but also the men, our partners. For the topic this morning, I have a very distinguished panel that is going to discuss the empowering of Gambian women for sustainable and equitable development. Within that topic, we will also have subtopics like gender-based violence, addressing a rising tide, and eliminating stereotyping, which is providing equal opportunities, dealing with inequity, and breaking social norms, which is institutionalized gender discrimination. As I said, all of these topics are very, very important and relevant for discussion, very topical. And it is really not only in the Gambia, but as we have seen, this transcends. It is all over the world that we have this problem. And the fight for women equality, and by equality, I just want to qualify that it's partnership that really we're seeking for, partnership to be able to develop ourselves, especially our country. Because you cannot move forward with only half your population. You have to get everybody involved, including the women, and give them their rightful place and empower them to be able to also realize their full potential. And if you look at the subtopics that we are discussing this morning, it cuts across. If we really want to empower, we have to look at the issues of gender-based violence, which, as we said here, it's a rising tide. But it has been there for a long time. It's just that we've now stopped to say, okay, we look at this. This is not okay. We cannot carry on with that. And also, if you look at the issue of eliminating stereotyping, this affects us all from everywhere. And we as women, we as men, all of us as women and men, should be involved in making sure that these change. Because it's not just for the benefit of women, it is for the benefit of all. Yesterday, in my opening remarks, I said that I believe that equality for women is progress for all. And I'm sincerely convinced that this is what it should be. This is the case. So we're going to go into these discussions this morning. It's not my show today. It's really the show of my most eminent panel, whom I'm very, very pleased to introduce this morning. And I will start with none other than the Honorable Minister FATOU KINTEH Sanyang. I will just briefly introduce all of them with their different backgrounds. I know you can also find it in the brochure, but just to say that briefly, that FATOU KINTEH Sanyang, our Minister for Women's Affairs, Children and Social Welfare, attained a BA in Sociology and History. And she came home to join the Gambia Family Planning Association for 7 years and has risen through the ranks to the position of Program Officer, Information, Education, and Communication. And in 1999, she left again for Cardiff, United Kingdom, to pursue a master's degree in population development at the University of Wales. And with her experience in advocacy for the rights of women and children, she served the director of Women's Bureau and coordinated several projects. And before this appointment as minister, she was the national coordinator of FGM, female genital mutilation, and gender for the UNFPA. Please put your hands together for the Honorable Minister. We also have with us this morning ANTA TAAL, who is an economist with 11 years of professional experience in international development, in trade and investment, public-private partnerships, and capital market development. She is currently working at the International Trade Center in Geneva as a fellow. She has also worked for the Ministries of Trade, Industry and Development, and Economic Planning and Industrial Development, and most recently, she's worked at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs in the Gambia. And most of our work in government focuses on policy analysis and development, policy dialogue and coordination and research in the area of trade and private sector development. Another eminent panelist that we have this morning is Mr. SAIT MATTY, who is a political science lecturer and a researcher at the University of the Gambia, and he's focusing on Gambian politics. But at the same time, over the past few years, he's worked as a social justice activist, widely on children and youth and related policies. He's also tackled issues like harmful traditional practices, such as FGM and child marriage. And he has served as the national coordinator for Safe Hands, the Gambia, one of the biggest gender-based organizations in the Gambia, working on issues affecting women and girls. Please, again, put your hands together for both ANTA and SAIT MATTY. Then, last but not least, of course, we have our Mary Khan. Our Mary is the founder and CEO of The Woman Boss, which is a global creative space for women and girls by women, where they curate, collaborate, engage, and learn by focusing on entrepreneurship, innovation, and leadership. She is also the CEO and principal consultant of ACAN Incorporation, a management consulting company, and the founder and CEO of Innovate Gambia, which are initiatives created to help revitalize economic development in the Gambia and the region. She is also the president of Point Click Technologies, which is a cloud management company, and it operates in 4 continents, the USA, in Africa, in Europe, and Asia. She was also the executive vice president and the chief financial and operating officer for Carolina Small Business Development Fund, managing their social impact investment portfolio. As you can see, with this very impressive CV, she has worked over 20 years in financial, nonprofit management, and innovative entrepreneurship ecosystems. She's again the founder of North Carolina's Black Entrepreneurship Week and the first ever partnership, which is the first ever partnership between a university and loan fund to create an innovation and entrepreneurship center in a minority community. She's done much more, but I will stop here. And I will let you read the rest of what she has done. So as you can see, this is a very, very impressive panel that we have this morning. Please put your hands together for her. And for the different subtopics that we will be discussing, on gender-based violence, addressing a rising tide, we'll have the Honorable Minister will address that, and SAIT will also be addressing those issues. On eliminating stereotyping, which is providing equal opportunities dealing with inequity, again, SAIT is one of those who will address this issue, as well as our Mary Khan. And for breaking social norms, institutionalized gender discrimination, ANTA will be addressing that. I'm going to start off by giving the panelists about 5 minutes, with the exception of the Honorable Minister. She has a lot to say, obviously, and heading a ministry which is one with a very vast portfolio. It's a big ministry. I think it is only fair that we give her that opportunity to be able to do that. But the panelists will address you briefly, and then we will have an interactive session, and finally, we will turn it over to the public to come up with your questions, of course, your comments or your suggestions. So we'll kick off with giving the floor to the Honorable Minister. Please put your hands together for her.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The Chairperson, participants, fellow panelists, all the protocols duly and respectfully observed. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this panel discussion as we mark 30 years of the existence of TAF Global. The topic of the discussion is empowering Gambian women for equitable and sustainable development. And my contribution in this will be on gender-based violence, addressing a rising tide. Violence against women is any form of action against a woman or a girl child with the intention of causing harm. One of the obstacles to women's empowerment is violence, which in itself is a human rights violation. Gender-based violence undermines the health, dignity, and autonomy of its victims. The Gambia is among the countries that have signed and ratified the International Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, otherwise known as CEDAW, as well as the Protocol to the Africa on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa. Despite this, however, most people, more specifically women and girls, are subjected to abuse. Violence can be classified into physical, sexual, and psychological. While the physical forms of violence include battering, the sexual forms include rape, sexual harassment, female genital mutilation, early and forced marriages. The psychological forms of violence include malice, constant criticism, deprivation of resources for physical needs, denial of sexual relationship, persistently staying away from home, especially at night, refusing the wife's food, serious restrictions on the woman's movements in terms of attending social functions, visiting friends and relatives. Let us remember that thousands of women and girls continue to be victims of all forms of sexual and gender-based violence. There is sexual harassment in the homes, workplaces, learning institutions, in the streets, in public transport, and the list goes on. Many of these go unreported and continue to be shrouded in the culture of silence, giving the perpetrators the opportunity to continue offending women and girls. It is unacceptable that these human rights violations continue to threaten the lives and futures of so many women and girls. It is an affront to their human dignity, an assault to their health, and an impediment to their well-being, to the well-being of their families, communities, and countries. Human development cannot take place, cannot be fully achieved as long as women and girls continue to suffer from these human rights violations or live in fear of them. The government of the Gambia is committed to ensuring that fundamental human rights of women and girls are protected and fulfilled. The Gambia is a signatory to the international human rights treaties and the corresponding instruments. Among these are the CEDAW that I mentioned earlier, the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, as well as the UN General Assembly resolution for the complete elimination of FGMC, which the Gambia adopted in 1979, 1989, and 2012, respectively. As part of its commitment to implement this, the following were legislated: the Women's Act 2010 and its amendment in 2015, the Domestic Violence Act in 2013, the Sexual Offences Act of 2013, and the Children's Act and its amendment in 2016. The chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, in November 2018, the Attorney General's Chambers and the Ministry of Justice inaugurated the gender unit within the Attorney General's Chambers. This unit comprises of staff of the Ministry of Justice, the gender unit of the Gambia Police Force, the prosecution unit of the Gambia Police Force, and the Department of Social Welfare. The unit has been tasked, among other things, to ensure that prosecution of cases of sexual and gender-based violence, as well as maintain contact with the survivors on sexual and gender-based violence. And I must emphasize that this is key in restoring the dignity and self-esteem of the survivors. It is indeed another landmark in this history of protecting the rights of girls and women in the Gambia. Protecting the rights of all individuals, more so that of women and girls in a society characterized by a high rate of gender inequality, gender insensitivity, patriarchy, unequal power relations in favor of men and boys, high rates of traditional practices which are harmful to the well-being of women and girls, is everybody's responsibility. This has made all of us to be defenders of the human rights of women and girls. Over the years, a lot of work was done in terms of capacity building of the police in sexual and gender-based violence and the role of the police in the management of such cases. And I want to give a little history to that. The reason why the focus was on the police was simply because when a case used to be reported, the police used to refer to it as a domestic matter, not warranting their intervention. This was the reason why in 2012, UNFPA came up with a program where gender and gender-based violence was integrated into the training curricula of the Gambia Police Force. And then a training manual for the police was developed, and 30 trainers of the training school were trained on the use of the manual. And also a gender unit established at the police training school and equipped. It was followed by a series of trainings, and over 1,500 police officers in the field were also trained on gender and gender-based violence and the role of the police in managing such cases. As a result of that program, the other security apparatus like immigration, the army, and the others also wanted similar support. And UNFPA didn't give that support because of funding constraints, but then the ministry is looking onto that because at the time I was the one coordinating that program. Now that I'm in the ministry, the onus is on myself and my staff to make sure that we do something similar for all the other security forces. This continued to be followed by the continuous sensitization of communities through radio and TV programs on SGBV and the role of the police. As a result, we have seen an increase in the number of cases reported to the police. FLAG, that's the Female Lawyers Association of the Gambia, the one-stop centers for victims of gender-based violence. There are two such centers. One is at the Royal Victoria Teaching Hospital, and there's another in Bansang. But recently, another one has been established at the Serekunda Hospital. That is the one-stop centers for victims. And the reason for using the facilities, health facilities, is to make sure that you have the supermarket sort of service, because you have the health people, the social workers, and the police also easily come in. So when a victim reports, a thorough check is done, and a proper report is done. A thorough check is done, and a proper report done, so that the right interventions can be made. And with all of these interventions, I just want to share another example of cases. In 2014, there were 14 cases reported. Out of the 14, 3 were sexual and gender-based of nature, and 11 other cases. That was October 2014 to December 2014. In 2015, between January and December, there were 92 cases of SGBV reported, 290 of other cases reported, and a total of 382 cases. Between January and December of 2016, SGBV, that's sexual and gender-based violence cases, we have 203 reported, and other cases of gender-based violence, 163, and a total of 366 reported. Between January and December of 2017, there were 153 cases of sexual and gender-based reported, 250 other cases reported, and a total of 403 cases altogether. Between January and December of 2018, 123 cases of sexual and gender-based reported, 198 other cases reported, and a total of 334 cases. We are still waiting for the cases reported in 2019. And this data was collected by the Women's Bureau from the Network Against Sexual and Gender-Based Violence. Yes, we have the cases being reported to the police, and what is missing from the data is the cases that have been prosecuted. The chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, FGM is another form of sexual and gender-based violence, which is a human rights violation, and it has devastating health and reproductive health consequences for our girls and women. In November 2015, the practice of FGM or cutting was banned and subsequently criminalized in the Gambia, marking an impressive milestone in the country's journey to end FGM and ensure that the fundamental human rights of girls and women are protected and fulfilled. With support from the UN agencies and other agencies as well, this significant accomplishment came to pass after several years of sensitization and training of individuals and communities by Gamco Tribe and other women's rights NGOs and government partners, of course, reinforced by stringent advocacy, decision, and policymakers. As a result, where FGMC used to be a taboo subject in both communities and in homes, today the issue has become a household word, and we have seen the intervention of quite a good number of youth organizations and youth NGOs also intervening in creating awareness and creation on the harmful effects of FGM across the country. Similarly, advocacy efforts of all partners resulted in government legislating against child marriage, which is another form of SGBV. A lot of work was also done in that area, and now we are seeing both government and NGOs, more especially youth NGOs, also addressing this issue, that's child marriage, through sensitization workshops and other forms of sensitization across the country. And I think that's quite remarkable. The mere fact that we have young people taking up these things up, I think is worth a commendation. Even though we have registered some gains by putting in place the necessary legislative framework, we have to work even harder to make them work. This requires the efforts of all, such as government, the UN agencies, donor partners, CSOs, individuals, communities, and families. Our responsibilities or roles might be different, but the objectives are the same, and that is to eliminate all forms of sexual and gender-based violence from the face of the Gambian soil. Women and girls form over 50% of the population of Gambia. No meaningful development can take place if their rights continue to be violated and their health and dignity and autonomy undermined. I would urge all the partners to come together in support of programs against sexual and gender-based violence in order to ensure the full participation of women and girls in the socio-economic development of the Gambia. For without their full contribution, socio-economic development cannot be achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for those remarks and analysis. As you can see, there has been efforts, there continue to be efforts at the domestic level, but also at the international level. The Honorable Minister has cited various treaties, conventions, and resolutions at the very highest level, which have been mainly to address this very serious issue. But what you can also note is that despite the efforts, the statistics are going up. It's not coming down, and this is something that should worry all of us. And we must continue to, as the Honorable Minister urges all of us, we must continue to find ways in which we can address this. And by doing so, we also need to be innovative and think of new ways in which we can actually step out of the box sometimes if we have to and address this issue. But let me give the floor to ANTA to also comment on this very important topic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. Basically, a lot of the times when we talk about women and girls, we tend to focus a lot on those at the base of the pyramid. I would like to start my intervention by highlighting the many women that are already breaking barriers and already breaking through societal norms. We have amongst our midst FATOU BENSOUDA. She's one of our own, and she represents the voice of women, the voice of basically part of the women that are shaping the global economy. I have interacted with women such as Amina Mohammed. She's a Nigerian, a Muslim from the northern part of Nigeria, and she is breaking barriers across the globe. She is #2 in the UN. I attended the ACP a couple of weeks ago in Nairobi, and I met the Prime Minister of Barbados, and so many other women that are doing amazing work that is not being acknowledged and they are not being celebrated. And I wanted to start by acknowledging and commending these women that continue to inspire and motivate women like myself. Coming back home to the Gambia, I think there's a lot of evidence that highlight the fact that 51% of our population is made up of women. And these women are found in mostly the productive sectors of the economy. They are the women in agriculture, and not women that are located within the lower part of the value chain, but they are the women that are adding value to the agricultural products, producing food. They are the women in the fisheries industry, adding value, smoking the fish, going through all the hard labor in terms of value addition to enable us to have food on our tables, but also to export. They are the women in textiles as well as handicrafts. And these women contribute a lot to the development of our economies. They are entrepreneurs, they create jobs, they generate income for the economy, as well as foreign exchange in terms of GDP contribution as well. And these women must be acknowledged. I would also like to basically acknowledge the efforts that has been currently ongoing, because it is the first that we've had a Minister of Agriculture who happens to be a woman in the Gambia. We now have the Ministry of Women's Affairs, and we do have some level of representation at the Parliament. I've seen Tuma Njai here. She's one of the many women that are actually breaking the norms. And we need to celebrate such individuals within our societies. However, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The UN Resident Coordinator has highlighted the fact that at the global level, there's been a lot of efforts in terms of empowering women and promoting gender parity. SDG Goal 5 and SDG Goal 8 focuses on these two priority areas. However, the evidence we have seen lately has highlighted the fact that at the pace that we're going, we are far behind from meeting these objectives. In fact, if we don't change the mindset, and not just at the local level, not just at the African level, even in the Western world, it might take us up to 100 years to meet these goals and objectives. So it calls for collaboration both from the government side, from the private sector side, and civil society, as well as academia, to move this agenda forward. I will stop here for now until we come back to the second round.
Thank you very much, ANTA, for a short, precise, but very, very, I would even say, analytical situation, and especially highlighting those women who are breaking barriers. It's important to highlight them. I always say that it is possible for all women. I mean, some of us, or most of us, were raised to believe that we have our place, and that's where we should stop. But I always say that there is no glass ceiling. Even if there is this glass ceiling, we have to shatter that ceiling. We cannot allow it to. So this is what really should guide us, especially the young women and girls. This is what they need to know, that the sky is the limit. You know, you cannot really say that this is where you should end or this is where you should stop. We can go all the way, and we can do the work. This is also important to say. It's not just because we as women, we have to be given a quota because we are women and we are trying to solve this problem. No, women should equip themselves and be in a position to attain these very important jobs and roles, and also show that they are competent to carry those roles. It's equally important. But let me give it to now SAIT for his remarks.
Thank you very much. So for today, I will try to change my name. I'll cover this word, and I am MATTY today. But thank you very much, Madam BENSOUDA, for giving me the opportunity, and also for TAFCON for inviting me to talk. I wanted to start by saying that there are two words that I don't really like, and that is empowerment, and there's this quota system. And then you just explained to that fact. Because I believe these two words have been used constantly to regurgitate a system that has been, that has helped to continuously undermine the progress of our partners, of women, in the interest of giving them places, or we need to empower women because they are our partners. I don't like those things. But today, that's not the reason why I'm talking. That's not the reason why I'm here. But I want to take us through a process, and for us to understand the current state of where we are, and as highlighted by the previous panelists. Even though there are efforts where we're trying to create this gender balance. I want to take us back to 1960s. In the 60s, when Augusta Jawara, writing, using the pen name Ramatullah KINTEH, wrote this brilliant play called The Rebellion. And the idea of the rebellion was to challenge the power structures, whether it is a social, cultural, that exists, that deny women that right, that right to enjoy their humanity. And in 2020 today, we're still discussing about the same power structures that continue to hinder the progress of women, and generally, I can say, the progress of this country. And this must stop. And if we want it to stop, we must also start rethinking the ways in which we have been socialized into understanding these different dynamics. Why is it that today whenever we're talking about gender-based violence, like the Honorable Minister mentioned, you go to the police will take it as a domestic issue, because it is seen as a woman's problem. You know, it's not seen as a criminal. For me, I see it as a crime to beat a woman, to mutilate a girl. I see this as criminal actions, because you are denying the person their full potential to enjoy their human rights. And this cannot be seen as a woman issue, but it must be seen as a criminal issue, and it must be taken from that point on. But the power structures continue to remain, and that's why we continue to talk about these issues. And for me, one thing that we used to do at Safe Hands for Girls, and right now I think they still continue to do that, is to making the case for girls. I'm sorry, the older women, because I think you're a generation that we have lost, but I think based on our current generation and also the younger generation, We need to rethink our strategy. We need to rethink the way that we intervene in terms of how do we want to create that equality, how do we want to create that balance. And for us, we believe that we need to challenge these power structures. And why do we need to challenge these power structures? Because when we're talking about eat health, in this country we know, evidence has shown that it is between 10 to 14 years that we see that the lives of girls begin to derail, that the issues of poverty comes in. Then we see issues of violence against women begin to start. And at the end of the day, we also see that these young girls are not given that opportunity to move further. And so historically also programming that targets these young women are also is only created to target young women or girls that will come to these programs and isolate a greater number of these women within the community. So in terms of our interventions, we must also start thinking about how do we reach the girls that are in the lowest of the communities, places where they are very hard to reach, where we build their assets, their social assets, because these power dynamics are continuously being posed and sustained by the power relations that exist. And for me, I think as a start, I would say that in order to change, in order to create this enabling environment where the 51% of the population that continue to produce the food that we eat, that continue to maintain the economic survival of this country must be recognized. And in that we must change the power structures, and in doing that we must change the social structures, and also we must change the economic dynamics that continue to impede women. For me, I will just use this as a starting point, and then subsequently we'll engage broadly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, State, for those remarks. Even though I will insist on calling you State and not MATTY, because I do believe that as a man also, you do have a role. You have a rightful place to sit here and to discuss those issues. As I said, both men and women should engage as partners to be able to move this forward. You cannot leave it in the hands of women and say that it is your thing. It is not your thing. It is, as women, it is our thing as a community. But thank you very much for those remarks. And last but not least, I will give the floor to AWAMARRY to give your intervention.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, special guest, honorable guest. Thank you, Uncle Tuck, for creating this platform to galvanize ideas on how to further our nation's development, especially on gender equality and the women agenda. We all know that women continue to face significant barriers to equality. Because of unconscious gender biases, many go unnoticed. Women still do the vast majority of unpaid work in the home and workplace. Our cultures are often out of date and designated to accommodate the needs of women. Unconscious bias is pervasive and often goes unaddressed. Globally, women are underrepresented in corporations. There are only 27 women heads of states in the world. 70% of discretionary spending is done by women. And we all know we spend 90% of our income on our families. Studies also show that women are most innovative. We pay off our debt. So then where are the women? We are here. We have simply been plagued by gender inequalities for generations. All these factors and more result in a pipeline problem in business. There are just not enough women making it to senior leadership roles or in board seats. While more women than ever have primary and secondary degrees, only 6.6% of Fortune 500 companies are CEOs. With 51% of our nation in the Gambia being women, we represent less than 30% of our government. I want to share some of my experiences as an executive in the US, and then since I returned a year ago in the Gambia. So at a young early age of 24, I was promoted from a staff accountant to a chief financial officer. My age at that time was one obstacle. However, being young and a woman created a harmful environment for me. I have heard questions such as, I'm sure most of you can relate, can you please make me some coffee? Can you bring me water? Can you hang my coat up for me? I have also heard statements such as, I hope you're not pregnant. Women belong at home. Leave it alone. That's a job for a man. Why educate girls when in the long term, they're only going to stay at home and become wives? So then, how do we eliminate stereotyping, we think? We must ask. By being intentional. By being intentional about hiring women, by being intentional about educating girls, by being intentional about promoting women to leadership positions, by being intentional about recruiting women for boards, by being intentional about being socially conscious and sensitizing the country on issues on gender equality, violence, sex education. By being intentional that ANTA, I think, mentioned, celebrating women. But not only that, women need to celebrate women. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much, Mary. I like the way that you've ended, that women should celebrate women. I believe it is critically important that we continue to have the support of fellow women as well, to encourage us to move forward. It's really usually very, very unfortunate to see women trying to bring other women down. It's very unfortunate, and that is why I said this is work for all of us, not just women alone, but also women and men. I just want to come back to ask a few questions based on the presentations that you've made. And I will start with the Honorable Minister. In your presentation, you have discussed the many challenges that are faced, but also the efforts that are being made to counter those challenges. And we noted at the very beginning, at least in terms of statistics, we saw that despite the efforts that are being made, the numbers are not going down. Personally, maybe I should just mention also that this is not only happening at the national, domestic level, it's also happening at the international level. And when it comes to sexual and gender-based crimes, what we have seen, in my position as a prosecutor, what we have seen is that the issue of gender-based violence in conflict is not going down. And despite the convictions that we have at the various international criminal tribunals, it is still going up. And any conflict that comes up, even after convictions that we've seen and the efforts that we're making, you see that sexual and gender-based crimes is rising in those conflicts, takes place. And the statistics also keep going up. And I have always thought that we should use our positions to see what can be done to address that. So one of the first things I did as prosecutor of the ICC is to come out with a policy on sexual and gender-based crimes. And that policy was, since 2014, I think 2 years after I became prosecutor, I took out the policy, which was based on very wide consultations. I consulted states, I consulted civil society, I consulted diplomats, I consulted academics, and we discussed this, and they sent their suggestions, and most of this was incorporated in the policy. And today what I decided to do was to make sure that, yes, it's good to come out with policies, but it's even better to make sure that those policies are implemented. So I have training across my office from those who analyze the crimes, to those who investigate, to those who prosecute. And this policy is being implemented because I thought that it is an opportunity. I thought it is an opportunity in my position to use that to be able to do something to address the issue of sexual and gender-based crimes. And if you look at all my charges across the cases, I've made sure that wherever I find the evidence on sexual and gender-based crimes, I make sure it is charged. And even the recent case of Al-Mahdi in Mali, who was not only destroying cultural property, but was also engaged in forced marriages. You know, seizing girls and making them marry other people in the northern part of Mali. So he has also been charged with these crimes. So it is important that I believe that we should use this opportunity to be able to implement. But I will come back to what you were saying. You said, despite the efforts, the numbers are rising. What, in your opinion, do you think needs to be done further to address this scourge? Because it's really a scourge that is affecting society. What do you think, as the Minister for Gender, for Family Affairs, that we need to do more?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think, first of all, we have to congratulate ourselves for our efforts. Before, these cases were never reported. And because of what we have been doing with the police, now people are gaining confidence in the police and coming out to report. This is a remarkable achievement. This is one step towards taking care of the issues. Yes, they are reported, and but many a time, families will come in again and withdraw the cases. But the police don't stop at that. If the cases are to be withdrawn by families, the police make sure that they go meet the family members and discuss these things thoroughly so that they try to avoid such interventions at the level of the family and also at the level of the community. Yes, we want to see prosecution. But again, I think what the police are doing is also one way of reducing and eventually eliminating this, because people are becoming more and more aware that it's against the human rights of the women, it's a violation of their human rights, and it's criminal, and perpetrators can face prosecution. The next thing we are also doing is to make sure that now, once the case is with the police, and in our trainings of the police officers, we are making it clear that once it is the police, there's nothing like withdrawing the cases by the family members. It becomes a concern of the government, because there is the Domestic Violence Act, there is the Sexual Offences Act, which are criminalizing these acts. So once it is the police, it can never be withdrawn. And we are working closely with the gender unit of the Attorney General's chambers. It was established purposely to make sure that when cases reach the police, they can never be withdrawn, this to be prosecuted. This is something that we are really going to work on and make sure that we set examples for Gambians. Let 2 or 3 people be sent to jail, and then people will know that these things cannot be done the way they want it done. And at the moment, there are cases at some of the police stations. I don't want to name the police stations, and I've intervened individually and to make sure that the cases are never withdrawn. These people should be sentenced to prison so that people know that it's a violation of the fundamental human rights of women and girls. Okay, and you mentioned the gender policy, which has been in my mind for quite a while, even before I left the UN. I was a UNFPA staff for a very long time, and I also did work on a UNDP project for 7 years. And we were thinking of coming up with a policy, but we had funding constraints. But now, as Minister of Women, Children and Social Welfare, we are very busy at the moment setting up the structure of the ministry. It's a big ministry. And yesterday, my sister and friend is one of those who was giving us a lot of support in that area. And we are working on the right structure for the ministry. And in that structure, I just want to inform everybody that Women's Bureau and Social Welfare are now under this ministry. Very soon, there will not be anything like Women's Bureau or Social Welfare. Instead, there will be directorates under the ministry. And we are going to have a directorate on sexual and gender-based violence, which will be very solely and wholly responsible for making sure that these things don't happen anymore in our communities. And one of the things that we'll be doing, as soon as that directorate is established, is to come up with a SGBV policy. And we'll also come up with a strategy plan to operationalize it. I have passion for some of these things, and I will make sure that these things are put in place And we work together with the police and other security apparatus, and of course with support from our UN agencies and other partners to make sure that we reduce drastically the occurrence of this, and eventually in the long term, eliminate it from the surface of the Gambia. The good thing is that we are getting more and more young people getting involved, and I'm very happy about that. I remember at UNFPA, we supported a lot of young people's organizations like the Girls Agenda, Think Young Women. My colleagues will say, "Your girls." I said, yes, my girls are the future adults, and you must give them all the support. And I make sure that when their programs come to UNFPA, I give the fullest support technically and recommend financially that they be supported. And then today, they have been able to reach out to quite a number of young people. And my reason, and the reason for the UN supporting them, was because their target audience are young people. SAIT MATTY, in his intervention, said for the adults it's late. No, it's not late, because it's adults who can still be guiding the young people. But then our focus at UNFPA and also in the other UN agencies for supporting these young women's organizations is simply because their target audience are young people. And it is young people whose mindsets we must change. They don't only talk to women and young girls, they also address in their audience, you have young women and young boys, most of whom are even adolescents. And then that way we have to make sure that we talk to those people, change their mindsets so that even before they grow up, they are empowered and they are able to address some of these things. And then the male members will have respect for the women. And the female will also have respect for the others. And then I just want to come here also with the issue of stereotyping. With stereotyping, it must start from the homes. We are all guilty of stereotyping in our homes. Girls are doing certain chores, boys are doing certain chores. Girls dress in a particular way, boys dress in a particular way. It's all wrong. Let's give them equal opportunities. I still say a big thank you to my little father. He had 5 children, but he gave us equal opportunity. He gave us equal opportunity. I learned to cook when I was in Form 3. Nobody will believe that, for I'm from a Mandingo girl. If my father saw me then by the kitchen, whoever is cooking on that day is in trouble. As a result, in the family home, when I even pass by the kitchen, the person cooking will drive me away. Get out of here, I don't want your father's trouble. So that was simply because my father gave me and my brothers equal opportunity. When I was in primary 4, my father started mentioning the word university. I was like, what word is that? So I had to quickly go into a dictionary to look for the meaning of university. Because he had been saying to me, I want you to go to university. Then I looked for the word, knew the meaning, and I discussed with my teachers in primary school. Can you imagine that? Primary school, as early as that. And I worked towards it. I went to the same university with FATOU Menga, Furebe College. Then Furebe College was Furebe College. And then I progressed. But then, this is why I'm saying that it should come from us as parents. The stereotyping, we can eliminate as parents. Because you cannot be giving orange, pink and flashy colors to the girls and blue to the boys. And then when you buy toys, you buy airplanes and cars for the boys, and then you buy a baby doll for the girl. What are you trying to insinuate? To let her know that her role is to take care of babies and the home. Whereas you're teaching the boy that his role is going into the greater world. So I believe, and I still strongly believe, that the onus is on us as parents to teach our boys and girls equally and give them equal opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those remarks. I think that is the way to go. For ANTA, you mentioned that there is still a lot of work to be done, and there is a lot of work to be done. Have you been thinking, also yourself, what else we need to do to be able to address this issue of stereotyping? Because it's one of the, I believe that it's one of those factors that are impacting the way we think about the roles of girls and the roles of boys, the roles of women and men in society. So whether you have been thinking to say, even despite the fact that we've done a lot, as I said, and various efforts are being made, do you think that it is now time to also think out of the box now, to see, are there any other initiatives that should be taken to address this?
Thank you very much. I always tend to look at case studies that are working not just within the continent, but also outside. But just looking within the African continent, a lot of the times we tend to cite countries like Rwanda and Ethiopia as model economies. And these are economies that are growing at a very fast pace, not only limited to the fact that they basically come up with policies and programs that are inclusive but also diversified. Diversification in the sense that it doesn't only look at the older generation. Within the Rwanda's cabinet, you have about 50% women representation. At the National Assembly level, you have 61% parliamentarians in Rwanda. And it's the same in Ethiopia. The latest economic outlook study that has the forecast for GDP around the world has projected Rwanda and Ethiopia as one of the fastest growing economies. And this is not by default, it is by design. In Rwanda, when I was in DC doing a program on capital markets, I was there with some of my colleagues that were 30, 20-something years of age. These were women that are heading organizations in Rwanda. If you go to the Capital Markets Authority in Rwanda, you find a 30-year-old woman heading that organization. If you go to the Rwanda Development Board, you find young and dynamic women and men, because it's not just about women and men that are very competent and capable of moving the agenda forward. And these are the skills and talents that are harnessed to drive the agenda forward. Again, coming back home, I've worked at the Ministry of Trade for about 5-6 years before moving to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance is a relatively big ministry. It has about 9 directorates, and you only have 1 female director. And that female director is given a division with less than 3 staff. Again, it may be an unconscious bias. However, this is the reality we find in our institutions. When you walk into an office, whether it's the public sector, public office or private sector, private office, you find mostly women as secretaries. We are the typists. We are mostly the cleaners. Or even when we are the technical staff, we are not given the voice that is required or being heard to make meaningful change and decisions within the offices. So these are some of the things that needs to change. Again, we are doing a lot of work in terms of having women represented in cabinet, but I want to share a story, and maybe Alpha could also comment at some point, in the sense that when I was at the Ministry of Trade, I would represent the permanent secretary in board meetings. So I've attended board meetings at the Gambia Ports Authority, sometimes at GRTS, at the Petroleum Commission, and most of the time I'm either the only woman or the only woman and the youngest woman in the board. So I was part of the team that was working on amending the Public Enterprises Act of 1990, and one of the provisions was to propose the inclusion of women within the governance framework of these public enterprises. So I proposed a provision within the act that calls for at least 2 women in every board. So during the validation workshop, we invited all the managing directors, the board members, and the finance directors. We had a turnout of 85 participants. Out of that 85, we had less than 6 women in the room. And out of those 6 women, you had 2 technical women, which was Auntie Lucify, who's now the chair of GRA after the event, and you had myself, and the rest were support staff. During the review of this document, we spent more time debating as to whether this section of the act should be included or not, because most of the men, highly educated and highly exposed, were not in favor of this inclusion. Again, countries that are progressing, they make deliberate decisions and conscious decisions to include it, not just as a policy statement and treaties that are ratified, but translated into actions. And I think it's high time our government takes up these deliberate actions to make sure that it is not just a policy statement, but it is translated into laws and also into action.
Thank you, Anta. I really believe in what you say. I think at the government level, these very positive actions have to be taken, proactive actually, to change the status quo. But Sid MATTY, you discussed the changing of power structures. And but do you think that this is actually rooted in the cultural mindset that we have, the cultures that we practice? And because of that, it also impacts on the way we think about our sisters as men, our brothers, and also the fact that the Honorable Minister has mentioned this, that there are certain roles that are designated for girls and those that are designated for boys. What I'm actually asking is, do you think that as early as when they were boys and girls is when the efforts should be made to change the mindsets? Because this really, I think, unfortunately, we grow up with that, and it affects us later in life. We have heard very often, even a woman who's performing a very important role, sometimes someone will say, after all, jigen rekla. You know, so this I think is something that has to change. That has to change. But what are your views with respect to these power structures that you discuss?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. And for me, I have a background in history, and I like to study about institutions and to study structures and to see how they function. And if I am to compare what happened historically based on our own tradition as Gambians or as Africans, I mean, I'm talking about the raw African that we know about the Ghana Empire, the Yoruba Empire, or even the Jollof Empire, you know, or even Cabo. Very recently, we saw that women, in particular, were the kingmakers at that period. But this also has changed because there were a lot of interventions that happened. Either we can talk about the Arabs, we can also talk about the Europeans and how they came in and, you know, expanded or even changed that power structure. You know, the issues that we are talking about for me is all based on the economy, who controls the money, who controls the resources, and these are the issues. This is the power dynamic that needs to be changed. I am so happy that the woman boss is here, and also ANTA is talking about these issues, because if we continue to say, for instance, migration, it is the responsibility of the man to bring money into the household, then of course we're creating and reinforcing the same power structures. And I'm saying this because historically, we know that the food that we eat at the homes were basically produced by the women, and then they control that element of that power structure when it comes to the household. But the minute that agriculture, cash crops were introduced, the colonialists, they preferred the men to sell these products, and at that point, this created money for the men, and that's what has been used to, you know, to reinforce these power structures. And even today, as we're talking about 51% of our population being women. And they are mostly engaged in the informal sectors. We know that in the formal sector, it is seen as a man's world. You just give an example where even words like inclusion, things that needs to be there to create that enabling environment for everybody to prosper. These things are denied the other citizens. For me, I see it more as denying citizens their right rather than looking at a woman or a man, because these things needs to be handled within that way. Of course, we continue to reproduce these power structures economically, politically, even though now we are saying that women should not lead. Or religion say that women should not lead because women cannot be an imam, so women cannot be a president, for instance. You know, so we have in all this cultural, but these also are influenced by that. So we need to, go back to our culture, understand what has been the role of a woman within the African setting, and then try to introduce that within the current context so that we can move beyond this tokenism discussion that we continue to say. For me, I believe that there is no need to breach any nehalante. We need to just go and say things as they are so that we can change the dynamics that continue to exist.
Thank you, sir. That's actually the stereotyping that you were discussing. It's really the stereotyping that really women have their place and men have their place. And as we know, this affects our development, our progress. And you discussed it at length, and you've given several examples that we hear every day. That, I mean, so much so that people take it as normal. If you say, for example, jigen rekla, or if you see a woman and think that she naturally has to be the tea maker or the, so I'm sure you have also been thinking about this. You know, what further thoughts do you think we should put into this, and efforts we should put into this to change the status quo, to change not only just the narrative, but the way we act?
Thank you for that. I think, you know, I talked about being intentional. And I think what really needs to happen is education, and educating the girl from home, going all the way through, you know, high school, college, etc. But I think being intentional, it's so much, you know, different purposes that you can do in that aspect. In the sense that, you know, at home, like if, let's say, you know, I think Honorable FATOU KINTEH mentioned that, you know, men are asked to sit home and, you know, the women clean up after them. So I have my son and I have 2 daughters, and I make sure that equally they do the same chores. So it means that sometimes, well, most of the times actually, my son will wash the dishes. Not only because he's older, but because I want him to also take care of his woman when he gets older and gets married. But I think we have to, again, that's being intentional by teaching men now what to do. I think here in that culture, and I think you mentioned that, our culture has been this, that thing that whenever we go places, you serve the man, you pick up after them, you clean up after them, you give them the water, you wash their hands. So at the end, when is the man gonna do those things for you, right? Yeah, clap for that. Exactly. When is the man going to do those things for you? And that's what we need to start expecting from men ourselves. So it should not only be one way. What we're looking for, as you mentioned, is partnerships. We're looking for equal rights. We're looking for equality at home. So if I cook, you clean. If I clean, you cook, right? That's what we're looking for, and that's what we want.
Yeah. Thank you. I actually believe that it is possible.
Absolutely.
I think it is possible because we have, I mean, not all men are the same. We have seen and come across in our lives very progressive looking men. Absolutely. Really very progressive. And I just want to give the example, for instance, of Mr. Okodrame. I mean, I grew up in the same street as Oko. We used to spend hours just arguing and talking. And I know his views about these things. And there are several other people that I can actually cite who are very, very progressive looking, knowing that it is important to have the contribution of women for development for all. I want to thank the panelists very much. I do have time to turn it over to the floor.
Good morning.
From the ground floor. Good morning.
My name is Naboufal. I live in Côte d'Ivoire, and I'm engaged in women empowerment. I have one question for the panelists, and something that we have not discussed. We spoke about the place that is given to the women, but even though we give place to the women on board meetings and etc., they don't go for it. So I'm talking about the skills. We have not discussed the skills that need to be instilled into women in order for them to go for the seats that they deserve and that they could get. I'm asking to AWAMARRY, what are the skills that you are teaching, quoting quotes, at the Woman Boss in order for women to get the courage and the confidence to go for the seats that they deserve? Thank you.
My name is Absa Samba. What I wanted to talk about, 2 things. One is recently we've seen cases of sexual assault in Gambia. A lot of women coming out and talking about allegations of sexual assault committed on them by very powerful men in our society. So little has been done about it. In some cases, we've seen swift reaction from some institutions investigating the issue. However, after many follow-ups, it seems these institutions are afraid to challenge the powers of this man. And the thing about such men is they're very powerful in our society, they're very influential, they have access and they have loyalty. So the women coming out are getting attacked for speaking up by people who are loyal to them, and the institutions that are supposed to hold them accountable are not doing so because they're afraid of challenging the powers these men have. And I'm just wondering, how do we eliminate these issues, sexual violence in our society, if powerful men can get away with it? And what message are we saying? And what about the trauma that the women are subjected to? These are both short-term and long-term that they live with forever in our society. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is incarcerated women. They don't often get talked about in our conversations. Women in our prisons are very vulnerable. They're working with guards who are often men, and they have power and influence over them. What programs and services in the conversations that we've had, and how do we capture the realities and the needs of these women in our conversations? Thank you.
My name is Chinedu Opareke. I represent the Imo State government. Imo State is a state in Nigeria. We have talked about gender inclusion, women empowerment, both in the workplace and even in the whole of society. My question has to do with the other side. How do we then tackle the conversations around social graces, where social graces are extended to women, certain graces are expected? So do we now extend the conversation to say, look, because we want to have gender equity or gender equality, as some people call it, can we also start to address the social graces that society actually gives to women? Because we cannot eat our cake and have it, right? So if we're looking at competence and independence and you being who you are and taking for who you are, then of course we should also talk about eliminating those social graces that may actually be compensatory to the social injustices that women face in the society. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go with the first three questions. I'll hand it over to the panelists to deal with it. But I just wanted to clarify, what kind of graces are you talking about? what graces?
Ladies first?
Yes.
Ladies first? Yes. Oh, don't talk to her like that. Don't you know she's a married woman?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Those kinds of graces.
No, I just want to take you up on that. Do you really think you have to talk to any woman like that, even if they are married? Is that a social grace? It's expected. It's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. So the real issue is the way you talk to a man.
Yes.
If you talk to a woman that way,
yes,
that is when the question will be asked.
Yes. You have your views.
So
yes.
I guess I'll answer the later.
Yes, I will first hand it over to AWAMARRY. Yes, I know someone called AWAMARRY. That's why.
Yes, that's all right.
About ladies first. I remember when we were in school, we used to say ladies first after men.
I like that. All right, so to quickly answer her question that she asked about the programs that we have at the Woman Boss. But before that, I just wanted to answer a question in that sense that she asked about why is it that there are board seats being offered to women and women are not taking it, and what are some of the requirements and qualities that you have to serve on a board. So I will tell you, again, it goes back to intentionality. I had prior CEOs that I worked under, so my prior CEOs made sure they were being intentional, and they were men, but they were intentional about sending me to certain training, personal development, professional development. So it goes back to, again, depending on these guys, if they're CEOs, which majority are in the Gambia, or even if it's women, by sending you guys to professional development classes or personal development to personally develop you. So when you're sitting in board seats, you're ready. Because we can't come in and give it half. We have to work extra as women, extra. We have to know that we are going to be undervalued, and you should be okay with that, in the sense that, okay, what else can I do to prove myself, to come in, and every time I open my mouth, I'm giving it 100%, right? So for us, at the Woman Boss, we do believe that leadership encouragement and training should start early. So we actually have programs in place that's starting leadership training from the ages of 8 to 18 and then 18 and above. And so from programs that, from an 8-year-old standpoint, I have a girl, my daughter, I have 2 girls. When at the age of 8, she would ask all these questions that, you know, as a parent, as a woman parent, I started question, well, we keep thinking that these 8-year-olds don't know anything, that they're just kids. But they're asking, Mommy, when you go to board meetings, exactly what do you do? What do you talk about when you go into board meetings? When you boss, like when you're working with computers, because they just see me in the office, so when they come, you work with computers, what exactly do you do? So they know that Mommy goes to work, they know that Mommy goes, serves on boards, they know Mommy travels all the time, they know Mommy goes to Congress to work on policy. I've been to the White House where I serve on forums. So they ask these questions, what exactly is Mommy doing there? So I thought starting a program and teaching these young girls, 8-year-olds and above, on what it takes to be a leader will change the system, will change the societal norms. We want to break barriers. We want women in these boardrooms. I want to sit here maybe 10, 20 years from now and see a woman president. Why not?
I just wanted to add a few words as well, just in response to the question, in terms of offering women board seats and them not coming forward. I would basically share an experience that we undertook some time ago, because within the Gambia there are a lot of women that are highly competent, highly educated, but we don't know where to find them. So what I had done with my team was create a database of women in different fields, not just women that are being offered board positions just to fill in the quota, but actually women within the tech sector, very few, but they do exist. Women in the finance sector, they do exist. We have people like FATOU Jallo, who is an expert in private sector development and trade. We have Jaina Banyang, who sits in the GRTS board, also within the media. They are out there. What we have done is create a database, whether they're within the country or outside. You don't have to be in the country 12 months in a year to attend board meetings. You can come 3 times. We can solicit the services of FATOU BENSOUDA to come twice a year in the Gambia to offer advisory roles within the board. Rwanda is doing that. They have people, not only Rwandese, but even from other countries, females or male from other countries that actually offer expert advice. So we don't have to limit ourselves only to Gambians or Senegalese. If we don't have the expertise, we can have ISETA to serve in a board in Gambia. What is wrong with having a woman that is competent, leading an organization and has the expertise to serve in a Gambian board? There's nothing wrong with that. So I think we need to think outside of the box. Let's identify not only Gambian women and men, because there are men that also serve in boards that actually have no business sitting in those boards, but let's identify the right people with the right qualifications, both male and female, to serve in these boards that they have expertise to advise to move it forward. I think we need to start focusing on that direction.
That's very good. Yes. In fact, there was this question by, I think, Absa Samba, about these powerful men and maybe, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think the whole issue of women serving on boards has to do with leadership. As my fellow panelists have said, it requires a number of training, not only for you to be able to serve on boards. For you to be a good leader, you require training, and leadership training is also key. When it comes to women serving on boards, not every woman can serve on a board, because we all agree that some women don't have self-esteem. Some are highly educated, but you don't have self-esteem. But then the important thing for you to serve on board or wherever you see yourself is for you to know the stuff. That's important. When you know this stuff, and wherever you are able to explain or express yourself, whoever is on that board or wherever you find yourself, people give you credit, and they respect you for that. So let's forget about, for me, the word self-esteem, I think we should do away with that. Low self-esteem, we should do away with that. Let's make sure that women are trained in leadership quality, they have all the qualities that require them to serve up there. And then when they go on the boards, when they are serving on boards, they make sure that they know this stuff. They know what the board, this institution they are serving is all about. So when they meet with other board members, when they speak, they are respected, because when they speak, they talk sense and people give them respect. I think that way we can also make sure that women get respect, however the numbers are. Even whether it's 1 or 2 persons, women, for example, serving on a particular board, let them be sound so that when they speak, people know they're talking sense and they're giving the respect. Because again, it doesn't make sense having 50% board members female and they just go there, sit down and drink tea. I'm sorry I'm saying this, but sometimes we see that as well. So even if you're a single woman on a board, make sure that you know your stuff and you're respected. That's very important. That's what I believe. Okay, coming to the question from my sister about the gender-based violence. Yes, quite a number of issues have come out regarding gender-based violence. The perpetrators, I don't think they have gone scotch-free. The cases are on. The only thing is that there is a slow in the prosecution or whatever needs to be done. And we have to make sure that justice is done. I'm not aware of any where the perpetrator is a powerful man and as a result the case has been dropped. No. Cases are on, they are just slow, and many times when we make follow-ups, we're able to understand that there are few judges. As a result, the cases are not being given the right attention. But I'm happy to hear this from you, and we'll make efforts to make sure that some of the cases are treated fairly so that the victims are happy at the end of the day. Okay, for the victims, they need psychosocial counseling from the very beginning that the cases have been discovered, because that's very important so that at least they gain some self-confidence and are able to speak more when they are asked to speak and give out their stories. But be rest assured that the cases are not being dismissed. Work is being done. It's not easy. Just yesterday, I was talking to the Inspector General of Police about certain cases, and he referred me to talk to another person so that the cases can be speeded up and then the right justice is done. Because I'm a woman, I don't want to see women's rights being, women suffering and their rights being violated and no notice done about it. That is giving more chance to more perpetrators to go ahead and violate the rights of women. And as a ministry, the onus is on us to make sure that victims are happy at the end of the day. How can they be happy? When perpetrators are prosecuted and we show examples to many Gambians so that we reduce the incidence of the cases and eventually eliminate them on the surface of the earth. But it's not easy, as the prosecutor has just informed all of us at the beginning of her statement. SGBV cases happen all over the world. And they're even worse in conflict cases, in conflict situations, where we see the security officers who are supposed to protect the women, they themselves violate them. Women and the girls. It's not easy, but I think here, responsibility is on all of us. We all have a role to play at different levels to make sure that we fight against these cases, reduce them, and eventually, in the long term, we are able to eliminate them. Thank you very much.
All right, on this side.
Yeah, for me, I just want to, I don't want to engage in the social graces, because I also think we also men do receive terms like gentleman and all that, which sometimes I feel uncomfortable hearing people calling me gentleman, because I feel it is not, well, either I don't deserve the title or it doesn't reflect exactly who I am. But I think these are also cultural issues that we need to be able to adapt to see and try to see how best we can, we can situate certain things. There is nothing, not everything is bad. Some of the stereotypes that we're talking, some of them are negative stereotypes and some of them are also positive. But also it depends on who's saying it and how he is saying it and who's receiving it and how the person is receiving it. But I want to talk about the issue, one issue that is being raised by APSA, and is the issue of how is it that still there are cases of violence against women and our institutions are not doing much, or still it is seen as for me, I still see that most of these issues should not be seen as a woman issue, but must be seen as a criminal issue and must be addressed as a crime. But the more we continue to look at issues of sexual violence, issues of rape, as oh, it's only affect women, then we'll continue to allow the space for those things to keep repeating. And even in the institutions right now, that's what is happening. Like a girl or a woman will go look for a job, either you've been sexually harassed, or even you're working with somebody and still you've been sexually harassed. And we're here. We are talking about moving this country forward. Well, still, I don't know where we are going, because the half of our population, people that are holding this country together, we still continue to relegate them as second-class citizens. We need to change those things so that this country can move forward. But how do we address these issues of these institutions where still sexual violence and all these things continue? There is no institution in this, maybe exists apart from the UN systems and others where we expect that there are maybe gender policies within the institutions that work. But I don't know any government institution or even the university where I work where we have a gender policy. You know, we don't understand, or we don't know if for me, for instance, I sexually abuse a student, what will the university do? There is no policy, no guidelines, nothing to address those issues. We need to start with that. And I am saying that for the women, for the minister, I think one solution is to start making sure that all these different institutions that we have in this country incorporate and bring in gender policies as part of their governance and management processes. Because otherwise we'll continue to repeat, we'll go to court, this, that, and that until God's kingdom come and nothing will change. So we need to be serious about these issues that we are concerned, because the more we continue to relegate the women as second-class citizens, the more we'll continue to be stagnant as a country, because we will not move anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Actually, I left out the comment he raised. I think it was also a question about social graces. Yes. These are part of our positive social norms. And because you make such offers to women, does it mean that you should not also, you should violate their rights? And the social graces are positive, and it's a sign of respect to women, of course. Don't speak to her that way. Those are positive comments. And then it's another way of encouraging women to participate in development at all levels. But again, because we offer social graces, does it mean that we should not look at the negative social norms and try to address them? In all of our cultures, there are negative social norms and there are positive ones. The positive ones we promote, and the negative ones we try very hard to eliminate. Yeah, because women have equal rights like men at all levels. So we should bear that in mind, and where communities are not aware of that, we do a lot of criteria and sensitization so they become aware that women have equal rights as men. I know in all of our countries there's a lot going on in sensitizing communities about women's rights, so that at every level we are accorded the rights which are due to them. Okay, and regarding gender-based violence, sometimes women also encourage some of these things. In the Gambia, for example, you work in an office, you are well dressed, and the male colleague starts commenting, and you are like, the more oil rek. You are encouraging more comments and more advanced ones. You tell me that I'm well dressed, I tell you, I put a stop to it at the very beginning. So the next moment, you won't comment on the way I dress. Because I dress well, I don't want a comment from you, which I know eventually will be turned negative by you. So we women ourselves should be assertive and be able to know that certain comments are harassment. And we address it up there at the point, so it is not repeated. I remember last year, during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, at the UN, of course, as UNFPA, of course, we were the chairperson of the gender team group at the UN. And then together with our colleagues from UNDP and other colleagues, UNICEF and World Food Program, sorry, Wanya is not here, she would have arrested me. Yeah, so we observed the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and we started from ourselves within the UN building. And then we organized a half-a-day workshop for all the UN staff on sexual harassment. And some of the issues raised were quite alarming. Some people didn't know that those things are harassment. So we have to let people know what is harassment so that they address it there at the right time. You tell me that I'm dressed, I will not say, oh, I'll ask you to stop it. I don't like it. And you'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wish to commend the role that you're playing here in this very important topic. And I also wish to commend your esteemed panelists.
Indeed.
This is a very important topic that we are discussing. And we have been discussing this for ages, I think. And we've been trying to address it. But really, gender-based violence, I think the ratio is going up, according to the minister, and not coming down. So something is seriously wrong, and we need to assess or look at the strategies that we have been using to address gender-based violence. I believe it is closely linked with our culture. Closely linked with our culture. And unless and until those cultures are addressed, that's the negative part of our culture are addressed, it will be very difficult to eliminate gender-based violence. I will cite an example of one getting married. It is always the woman. The man gives dowry to the woman, and the dowry is determined by the parents or the guardians of the girl that the man is getting married to. You are asked all sorts of things. You know, some bring cars, some buy houses, some bring ganila tube, some bring jesner, gold. In my mind, in their minds, in the minds of the men, they are like buying, you know, buying the girl. You know, they feel after doing that, that it is their property. So at the end of the day, they can do whatever they want. Not only that, but taking the bride to the man's house, the girl is cleansed, the girl is bathed, the girl is covered, and the girl is sat in the middle of the compound with men present. Now I see women are included. The husband is not there. It is the girl who is advised, when you go to your husband's house, munyalko, suturalko. You know, it is the man is not there, and they don't say the same things they're saying to the girl. They don't say the same things to the man. Why? If you are telling me when I go to my husband's house, I should be patient with my husband, I should support my husband, I should help my husband, I mean, say the same thing to him, equally. But that doesn't happen. Even when the bride is going to the man's house, their first night, the girl is covered, the aunt is in front, and they crawl. They are crawling. No, seriously, they're crawling on the ground, and when she gets there, it is the husband who lifts her up now and places her on the bed. You know, these are the cultures which I think really we should look at again. If you're doing that to me as a bride, please do that to the man. Yes. You know, this is my point. So really we have to look at our culture also, the cultures that perpetuate gender-based violence. These are the things. Thank you.
We men are part of the problem. I'm sorry to say, but we men are part of the problem. And basically, we need to change our attitude. We need to change our attitude. But before I go into attitude issues, I'm going to talk about a little bit about culture, just as Auntie Jainaba mentioned. How do we break the norms within our culture and our traditions, especially at the grassroots level? How do we break that to ensure that at least issues around equity and gender issues come on board? When, at the same token, unfortunately, you only have men as religious leaders, men as cultural heads. So how do we break that? How do we break that silence? Secondly, what's the modern man? I'll give you an example of a modern man. I've been married for 22 years. And by the age of 7 years of age, I started cooking, I started ironing, and I started doing the domestic chores. And up till now, I still do those chores. So, that's the modern man. Girls, ask that of your modern men. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I gave you the mic. I'm really glad. I wanted to end it here, but we have a very important contributor to my left, Mohammed Kurbali. And I think what he's going to say is also important, because amongst us, we also have those people who are living with disabilities, who are also part of the society and should feel that they are fully part of this society. So I just want to give you the floor to make some remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mohammed Kurbali, the Gambia's first and only visually impaired magistrate and a lawyer by profession. Before putting my question forward, I just want to make an established statement or a fact that in this gathering, there are persons with disabilities present in this important gathering that actually ensures or envisage that persons with disabilities are integral part of the society. So obviously inclusion and participation by persons with disabilities is important and shall be considered by the Gambia government and all other relevant authorities.
Thank you.
And of course, my question will go to the distinguished panelists, at least making reference to the preamble of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that envisages that including persons with disabilities in programming, policy making, decision making processes is actually a relevant strategy for any progressive society for sustainable development. And of course, Article 6 of the UN Convention talks about women with disabilities, that the state parties shall ensure that women with disabilities are fully included in all development processes. So therefore, my question here will be whether the distinguished panelists, although talking about women empowerment, which is very important, I'm also an activist as well, but whether you have also thought of strategizing your thoughts in including women with disabilities. That is my question. So my final statement will be just as it will be an invitation. That is, the Gambia Federation of Disabled actually intends to commemorate World Disability Day tentatively on the 10th January at the Westfield Monument. This day reminds the world over about the existence or the presence of persons with disabilities all around the world, and at least this is a day aside that is set by the United Nations General Assembly so that people with disabilities can also feel who they are, also express their problems and other things. But it is tentative in the fact that subject to the availability of the budget that is actually programmed and drafted by the Federation. So obviously we are unable to have enough funding to commemorate. So whoever can help to contribute to make this commemoration on the 10th February on Friday a success, actually you are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I must just remind that TAF, that is Alhaji Mustafa Njai, with Dr. Karamo Songo Hino International Foundation, has actually established what we call Gambia Disability Trust Fund, which is established in order to provide persons with disabilities microloans in order to empower them economically. Thank you, Mr. Fanjai.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Council, for the opportunity. My name is Mohamed Jeng, President, Law Student Association, University of the Gambia, Secretary General for 3 organizations working in the area of human rights, and a founder for UN SDGs in the Gambia. My question first goes to the Minister, Madam, and the question is, with the advent of the draft constitution as per section 31, which is giving the government a discretionary power not to enforce human rights in the presence or the absence of funding or resources, what is your ministry doing to make sure that this is not a power that is going to be abused by the government not to enforce rights of women in this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will hand it over to the panel, Minister, Honorable Minister.
Yeah, okay.
And if you, other panelists, if you have any remarks, but we also need to be brief about, because we're eating into the other panel that is coming after us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think I'll start first with the question raised by the last participant. As a ministry, we have had the opportunity of looking at the draft constitution and make sure that the gender issues are adequately addressed. In fact, even before the ministry was established, I remember in January last year, as the UNDP supported the Ministry Women's Bureau to do a review of the draft constitution, and myself and other members of the UN staff then were part of that. And we made sure that we addressed the gender concerns. And even now, when the second draft was sent to us, we quickly formed a group of technical persons who looked at it and made sure that the gender issues are addressed adequately. And also at the level of government, at the level of cabinet, we also had the opportunity of looking through the draft constitution and make sure that the gender issues are addressed. So make sure, so be rest assured that the issue that you have raised will not appear in the constitution, because government is giving full support to make sure that gender issues are adequately addressed across the board. And the constitution, being the highest law of the Gambia, should reflect these concerns so that everybody else will be taking cue from the constitution. About the disability, people with disability, Mr. Gentleman, be rest assured, there is a disability bill which has just been drafted and is at cabinet at the moment. I was in the National Assembly last month, and Assembly members wanted the disability bill to reach them by March. I had assured them that March is too far for me. In January, it should go to the National Assembly for enactment. And all these issues that you have raised are being addressed by the disability bill. And I've been telling people with disability that now they have a ministry which will look into their concerns. And even this issue of the celebration of 10th January, we are giving full support and make sure that we are present, and not only to be present physically, but also give support financially to make sure that the program that you have set for yourself to mark this celebration succeeds. And yes, Janaba, thank you very much for the concern. Yes, it's all about our culture. And then I think the onus rests on all of us to make sure that we address some of these things. The positive aspects of our culture, we should maintain, we should embrace. But the negative aspects, let's try to do away with those. And we have to do that through sensitization, awareness creation, so that eventually we make sure that we eliminate those from our culture and maintain only the positive aspects of our culture. I know that for the Christians, before they get married, there is always a counseling of the couples in the church. We Muslims don't have that. And then I don't know when we can also start doing that, making sure that couples are counseled so that they respect each other and they all know that they have equal rights, they are as partners and also as couples, and that is maintained throughout their life as partners. And again, this whole issue of negative cultures, I always have been saying that we have to embrace the positive aspects and do away with negative parts. It is our responsibility. It's not that of government alone. It's to start from the home. That's where the teaching should begin. Don't say that your children will taught some of these things in school. No. It should start from the home. When you teach them about these things in the home, when they go to school and teachers talk about it, then they are able to appreciate. But I feel, and I still strongly believe, that the best teachers to our parents is ourselves. The best teachers to their children is ourselves, the parents. We are aware of all of these things. We know what the consequences are, so let's make sure that we address them at the level of the family. Coming to Walabaji's concern, yes,
It is the responsibility of all, more especially the men. Come on, our men go to Europe with their wives. In Europe, you do babysitting, you feed the baby, you take care of the home, you even cook. But the moment you board the flight coming to Gambia, you drop those things at Gatwick. It's not right. If your parents, if your children see you doing domestic chores, it will be easy to teach them. Because they know, oh, daddy does it, so I should also be doing it. But you go to Europe, you do everything. When you come to Gambia, at night the baby cries and you wake the wife, your baby is crying. It's most unfair. The reason why you adopted the lifestyle in Europe, because it's their lifestyle. But you also know that it's the best thing for one to do. So on return to Gambia, you should maintain those things. Because as I keep saying, let's maintain the positive aspect and drop the negative part. So I think we women are to be blamed, but to some extent men are also to be blamed. We women simply because if you see your man washing a spoon, you become angry. No. Teach him to also wash the plate. And later let him wash some other things in the house. That way we are able to contribute effectively towards maintaining the household. And then when we teach our children are begin to appreciate because they have seen mommy and daddy doing it in partnership. Thank you very much.
Yes. So just wanted to make a comment to the guy that spoke up here. What is it that we can do to educate some of the men on the societal norms, etc.? I would say I'm challenging you to actually come up with solutions from your fellow men on how do you go around the country and create programs and sensitization of programs that can educate some of these men on what is it that we can do, especially when it comes in terms of what men, their role, men in the house, women in the house, girls, etc. So I'm challenging you on that. So don't put it back on us. I'm actually putting it back on you. And so for Absa's comment, because I wanted to say something and I forgot. I think, during the gender-based violence, etc., all the things that were happening on social media, I think what would have been really nice is to see government come out and speak up and say, we hear you, we understand you, we support you. And I think that's what's been lacking, to say that. So women always feel like, oh, we're not getting that support, so nobody else is listening to us. So I think going back to that, it's that I'm challenging our fellow, and especially the Honorable Minister, to come out more, to speak on more. If they're doing so many great things within the ministry, to come out and speak on that. And I just wanted to make a quick last comment, especially to my fellow that spoke on the board, and I'm also putting it back on you guys. So when I first came to the Gambia about a year ago, my first thing to do was, I thought, to reintegrate back into society is to serve on boards. Because I did that in the US, and then I came in. And I was knocking literally on almost every door, and nobody responded back. So I'm here, but nobody wants to take that initiative. And I think it's almost like they're afraid. So I'm challenging you now, all right?
Just wanted to say a few words to thank Uncle Taf and to use him, basically present him as a perfect example of a gentleman that has empowered the female he is surrounded with. His company has gone global and is becoming more successful. I'm sure it was successful 30 years ago, but he has 4 or 5 daughters, mashallah. And all these girls are working for him. And you have seen how the company has gone to where it was 5, 10, 15 years ago to where it is today. That is a clear testament of what can be done when you diversify and you're inclusive.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
1 minute.
Yeah. 1 minute.
Yes, 1 minute.
Okay.
Thank you very much. When the issue of gender-based violence cases came out, yes, we did a press release. So we are aware of what is happening, and we are very concerned. So there was a press release. And we are getting established, and we are very few in the ministry. And once we get fully established, we'll be more aggressive in addressing some of these things. But to make sure that we are in line with the victims and we are supporting them, we make sure that there was a press release. Secondly, somebody mentioned religion and culture. Yes, we don't have Islamic religious leaders who are female. Although in the Christian sect, we have female Christian religious leaders. But then I keep telling women that gone are the days when men will interpret the Quran to suit themselves. Now there are English versions of the Quran. Read the Quran and know for yourself what your rights are in Islam. And for those women who can't read the English version, see women who can read it in English and let them interpret it to you. Because many a time, our male religious leaders or religious scholars interpret the Quran to suit themselves. But if you read the English version, then you know that the Quran respects women, and women have a right in Islam. Coming to culture, the cultural leaders, now we are seeing more and more female alcalos, and these are the people who are the custodians of our culture in our villages. And both the male and female are sensitized on all of these issues, and they address them when cases are brought to them for intervention.
I think I would entirely agree with my brother, even though he refused to introduce himself in terms of questioning or talking about the modern man. But I think the question should be, how do we deconstruct these issues of gender stereotyping, these issues of who a man is or who a woman is? In the beginning, I started by covering my name, SAIT, which is a male's name, because I'm in a process of trying to deconstruct this privilege that has been given to me as a man. I see nothing wrong with associating with a woman, physically, sexually. I know I'm a man. But then, throughout my life, I've worked with young women who have led issues that I found not to be a woman issue, but a human right issue. And for me, I've always seen it that way. And I think in our discussion also, we need to deconstruct those meanings and start to focus more on the human as general. Of course, there needs to be that affirmative action looking at the current situation to push certain things. And talking about strategies, I am a cultural person. I like our weddings, I like the colorfulness, but I don't like the money part. I also don't like the fact that women are being advised and men are not advised. And the way to change that is not to abandon the culture, but it's about the message that we are communicating. How do we change the message? How do we change the message? But for me, changing this message also needs to come to the bottom line, which I've been talking about since morning, changing the power structure. And for me to change the power structure, we need to change the economic situation of women in this country, because that's the basis. We can talk about stereotyping, power relations in the office, we can talk about all that, but as long as women continue to be treated as second-class citizens, where they continue to wait for their husbands to go to hospitals because they don't have the money, I mean, those are issues that we need to start talking about. Why are women dying in the hospital? Because some of them are waiting for their husbands to come, either to decide whether, they need to be operation or there's not, these are the issues that we need to talk about. These are the issues that needs to be in the front of the agenda so that we can change this dynamics. But to continue the discussion, maybe in 10 years we'll come and talk about the same issues, but we need to start taking steps. We need to start taking solid steps in changing this. And this must start with us by deconstructing who the man is, and through that we'll be able to move forward. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you will agree with me that we have had an excellent panel. It's really, yes. And I would, please give the panelists a round of applause. We will also agree that this is a topic that we cannot exhaust. We have to continue working on it. It is something that has been ingrained for such a long time, and it needs time and effort to make sure that we change this. Because as I said, changing it is not just for the benefit of women, it's for the benefit of society. So I thank you very much for your contributions also from the floor. And again, I congratulate TAF, and I congratulate the formidable team that is working with TAF. I think this is really, I have not attended the previous TAFCONs, but I think this can be the best, easily. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good.